I lost my sight. My eyes melted into boiling pools of vitreous humour so hot that they left streaks of blistered skin as they ran down my face like burning tears. My right hand froze solid and shattered into 1,000 pieces when I carelessly bashed it against a door jamb in terror. Once I realised what had happened, the bones of both my legs shattered outward like broken glass, shredded the flesh and muscle surrounding them. While this may sound like a fate of terrible consequence, my dearest reader, I can assure you that you will never know what it is to be a creature of flesh and bone, like I have. You will never have the degree of knowledge of frailty of the flesh that I have grown to know. I achieved a level of understanding of magicka beyond that of the Grand Masters of the Guild. But that accomplishment pales in comparison to the grander discoveries that this experience has bestowed upon me. The visceral description of one mage's masochistic journey to the limits of mortal pain thresholds may seem gratuitously brutal, but the research carried out by this brilliantly mad individual may tell us more about the School of Destruction than any conventional academic source. It is a flaw of many intellectuals to fall into the grooves of the great minds who came before them, and in doing so, new ground is seldom trod. Previously held conceptions are reinforced by conformist thinkers, and what we get as a result are comically oversimplified descriptions of the schools of magicka. No school is a victim of this quite like destruction. Take Barrow the Master Illusionist's speech to the battle mages, for example. He asserts that destruction is no more than learning how to do the maximum amount of damage in the minimum amount of time. He is correct in saying that destruction does centre around damage, but in acknowledging this, he has made the mistake of assuming that all destruction users must therefore only be interested in causing suffering and inflicting pain. But even this school, arguably the simplest of the lot, is capable of so much more than that, so long as academics overcome their fear of thinking for themselves. Hey guys, it's Drew the Daedrologist here, and welcome back to FudgeMuppet. We're drawing near to the end of my research into the various schools of magic, and I thought this topic would be the shortest and easiest of the lot. But not for the first time. As I mull over the destruction tomes in the heart of the Arcanium, the nuances of the Elder Scrolls lore has surprised me once again. Unlike Restoration, Destruction's equal opposite, books on this school are constantly being lent out to young mages, and it's been a real hassle just getting my hands on them. In this lesson, we're going to go over all there is to know about destruction, how it is typically used by the magically inclined masses, and most importantly, how a change of perspective can reveal the profound potential of this magicka school. So what is destruction? Destruction magic is concerned with dealing damage to all forms of matter, both living and non-living, and with making matter more vulnerable to such damage. With this basic description, it is quite easy, and not necessarily wrong, to assume that mastery of destruction brings with it a certain amount of danger. But as we've discovered throughout this series, that can apply to just about every school and every spell in existence. Destruction magic boils down to 5 basic types: elemental damage, value draining, value damaging, vulnerability, and disintegration. Elemental damage usually refers to the popular trifecta of shock, frost, and fire, but it is not limited to this, and another known elemental manifestation is poison. Value draining and value damaging generally refers to any application of magic that reduces or drains the life energies of a target. Disintegration magic, usually in the form of shock, can disintegrate equipment in most cases, and entire mortal bodies in extreme cases. As for vulnerability, spells of this variety make the target more susceptible to the effects of other destruction spells. You could become more vulnerable to the elements, to damage in general, or even to disease. Yes, disease. This is often forgotten by mages only interested in casting fireball spells, but destruction magic encompasses all of the rampant diseases and curses and plagues that have affected mortals in Tamriel's morbid history. I mentioned briefly that destruction is the equal opposite to restoration, and this description of the school reinforces that idea. Almost everything restoration magic tries desperately to remedy is caused by destruction. Healing wounds is one thing, but the Restoration School has always endeavoured, with great difficulty, to find cures for the many deadly diseases of Tamriel, and all of these diseases are forces of destruction. Destruction is the Padamai to Restoration's Anu. They are the battle of life versus death, harm versus recovery, a lot of damage versus Flex Seal. But we'll delve deeper into the importance of this soon. For now, it's safe to say that any student of Destruction would be a fool to limit their studies to the elements of fire, frost and lightning, as there's so much more to be harnessed within Destruction. Take something as simple as damage health. No fancy sparks or pyrokinetics, just health, and an onslaught of magical energy with the sole purpose of damaging it. Whether the Nerevarine of Morrowind ever attempted it is highly unlikely, but it is said that, with the power of custom spells, one could design a damage health spell with the duration, magnitude and area of effect to clear every living thing from a major city. Imagine the potential of that in war. If you're laying siege to an immensely fortified stronghold, why tear down the walls when you could purge the city of its population, leaving only a gigantic mausoleum for your men to claim, with no structural damage done to your new territory? And of course, there's also poison and disease. Have you heard of the Thrashian Plague? In the 2260th year of the First Era, the slowed slugfolk, residing in the coral kingdoms of Thras, released this artificially created pandemic on Tamriel, wiping out half of the population of the Iliac Bay region, and perhaps even the same quantity from the entirety of Tamriel. The plague persisted for upwards of 400 years in some areas of High Rock, and the wide-scale destruction was the catalyst for Tamriel's united efforts to exact revenge upon the Slowed, sinking their coral kingdoms into a sea of salt water and slowed blood. How about Corporis, the devastating disease related to the Blight? In the words of the savant, the greatest and most obscure threat is the Blight, a mysterious weather-like phenomenon emanating from the crater of Dagoth-Ur, warping and poisoning creatures in its path, and creating diseased horrors that attack travellers and outlying settlements. Corporis was an infection which destroyed the mind of the afflicted and caused grotesque deformations of the body. This too was created by a mortal turned demigod named Dagoth-Ur. The most terrifying thing about this disease is that it's incurable. When it spread across Morrowind in the Third Era, the 4,000-year-old Dive Fear studied those infected within the Corporisarium. Despite his wealth of wisdom, he could not cure the disease. Even the Nerevarine could not be rid of it, instead settling for a partial remedy which removed the insanity and the physical deformities. There's also the Nahatan flu, which spread from the depths of Argonia. This disease ravaged the non-Argonian population of Blackmarsh before spreading across Tamriel. And there is a theory that an Argonian shaman who, in retaliation for the awful treatment of his people by the other races, created the disease. Destruction's potential to completely change the composition of a mortal's body, infecting them with grisly diseases or simply depriving them of their life essence, is similar to alteration in many respects. But while alteration is associated with altering the state of the world and of the forces of nature, destruction alters the state of a living entity's body. If the misconceptions were true, and students of destruction were only interested in dealing the maximum amount of damage in the minimum amount of time, then masters would dedicate a lot more time to creating apocalyptic plagues, like Dagoth-Ur did, than they would to cast a lightning bolt. Half of the books I've found on this incredibly dangerous school have been about shock spells. One promising young mage hailing from elsewhere wrote an intriguing thesis on the inner workings of shock magic. A salient extract reads, "The reality of the Mundus is a great tapestry woven of strands of matter and magicka. A shock spell channels and manipulates magicka through the local warp and weft of the tapestry, agitating its fibres. This generates sparking, which coalesces into magical lightning. But what's ironic about this is that this destruction student resides in the Mages Guild of Corinth, a city that is well known for being plagued by the Nahatan flu. Even the legendary Vanus Galerian writes extensively about shock magic as a means of transport and a useful tool in combat. I can't help but feel scholars interested in destruction never delve beneath the surface. That's where the eccentric healer Vexis Velran comes into play. In my video about restoration, I spoke of the school's healing potential. However, the field of study requires a lot more research before the mortals of Tamriel can live without fear of illness and disease. Cure disease spells exist, as do a variety of blessings and potions, but the reality is, restoration is not a guaranteed cure-all. There are countless documented examples of restoration falling short. In the story titled The Exodus, we learn about a young girl named Vrala. Her parents had high hopes for their beautiful and sweet-natured little girl, but as much as they wanted the very best for their daughter, they were both wrong. Instead of growing up, she grew very ill. The temples told them to give up hope, and the Mages Guild told them that what afflicted Varala was so rare, so deadly, that there was no cure. She was doomed to die, and soon. During the tumultuous times of the Nahatan flu, a healer and priest of the Divines documented his attempts to save the lives of the suffering locals of Senchal. There are others like me in the city, those who have left home to risk their lives finding a cure. I am glad for the company, and with our combined efforts, we have found ways to comfort those dying of the disease. We keep them and ourselves wrapped from head to toe to limit exposure to the sores. The rumours of chicken broth easing the cough seem to be true, but none of the remedies I brought with me have cured even one soul. Once the symptoms begin, there is no stopping it. We have tried everything. Every potion, salve, incense, even prayer. Not one has recovered. I am so tired, so distraught that I cannot even eat. My stomach churns, my eyes are bleary, even breathing seems difficult. I just need a good rest. I know, I still have hope. There are even examples of rich monarchs who could not be rescued by the celestial touch of restoration. In A Brief History of the Empire version 4, Uriel Septim VI, the reigning Cyrodiilic emperor, fell from his horse, and despite the affluence of the empire and an abundance of assiduous experts, he could not be resuscitated by the finest imperial healers. So how do the mortals of Tamriel go about breaking new ground in the medical field? Well, this is where we refer back to what I spoke about at the beginning. Advancements come when great minds aren't afraid to strike out against the norms. Great innovators are often considered eccentric, or perhaps downright insane. We should also refer back to the key difference between study of restoration and destruction. Restoration is underappreciated, but the School of Destruction gains a profusion of new students every year. What could be achieved if some of these budding minds fought outside the box, straying from lightning bolts and fireballs to the frighteningly brilliant potential of the school? Vexis Velruan was once a promising young healer of the temple, only he was expelled for his unique approach to healing. In his writings, he says, "We had a number of patients interred in our humble sanctuary who had been infected with the red fever. My attempts to use the magical arts to turn the disease on itself were less than successful in the early stages. For trying to find a cure, I was cast out. It was not long after my exile that I discovered the means to eradicate infection using the destructive energies of magicka." While his words are vague, it seems as though Vexis did discover a cure for the red fever, and he did it by turning the fundamental tenets of healing on their heads, like vaccinations in our universe, or for a more morbid example, like chemotherapy. Vexis had stumbled across a profound breakthrough. When an infection could not be cured by restoration, it could be scourged by the violent forces of destruction. Unfortunately, the great minds of the magical institutions were not ready for his daunting proposal, and left in exile without colleagues to keep him in check, Vexis abused his discovery, growing addicted to the cleansing agony of self-inflicted destruction magic. In his own words, he became like a skooma fiend of the worst sort. He relished the pain, anticipated the moment when the energy and the pain would wash over him as one, freezing his flesh, burning it beyond recognition. His skin became a network of scars, sores, lesions and burns. But it was never enough. Never. He needed more pain, more power. In doing so, he achieved a level of understanding of magicka beyond that of the Grand Masters of the Guild. But the price was exorbitant, and his discoveries delivered him to Sheogorath, and his findings on destruction's healing potential were cast into the furnace like the incoherent scribblings of a madman. And there you have it, guys, the School of Destruction. This popular school may seem one-dimensional, but that may just be a result of the academia's tendency to conform, afraid of exploring destruction's potential. I hope you enjoyed the video, guys. Thanks so much for watching. I've been Drew, and I'll see you next time.